Well, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. So here I go with episode 4 of an adventure series for T.E.Lawrence, and so I'm going to review this documentary that I seen a while back and I thought was really good at the time, due to a lesser knowledge of the subject at the time of watching it. And now that I've rewatched it, it's not that it's inaccurate at all or doesn't. Well, it isn't. It doesn't tell the story properly, but it isn't that it doesn't tell the story. But it's an incredibly hard documentary review. It's a hard documentary to review, not in a good way, not like. Because it's so interesting, it's hard to explain kind of a thing. It's kind of more the opposite. So what I felt I had to do again this time, and it's not undermining the information, not necessarily learned for me personally, but sort of re-put into, words to write. It sort of, I don't know, it's not that it didn't give the information that you need, but it really didn't tell the story properly. It found to be very choppy. It jumped from subject to subject really rapidly and really quickly. It couldn't just tell the whole story for what it was, completely honestly, and then gone into sort of these other categories of, other interpretations and other ideas brought to the table about it. It kind of starts at the beginning of the story and then meanders into all of these different intricacies that have came through, different people and different times and that, and then loops back to the story, and then it's very choppy that way, and I find it really hard to keep up with, so it's hard to review in a narrative sense. So what I felt I had to do is do what I did with the accuracies and inaccuracies video, is to just write the bulk of what I perceive most of the viewers, at least of my level of knowledge on this particular subject matter, will find handy to not, as I said, relearn, but, have somebody else explain it once so you can, not write it exactly how they said it, not plagiarize it, but it's contextualized into words. So if you're, just writing it in point form, you can, whether you come up with your own words or come up with your own sentences, there's somebody else's, something else out there that sort of gives you a grip on the information that would be best for the viewer of the video you're making to obtain from what you're presenting. So what I found is I had to do them in point form, like I did the other video, which I don't want to do. Which the next documentary I'm going to review, I know for sure, that, because I've seen this one more recently, and I know for sure this is the rock solid way to present a documentary. The next one I do for the final episode, episode 5, but due to the way that this documentary was made, I felt that it would just be not only easiest, but just most logical and less daunting, not for me, but for the viewer, rather than have me try to explain it. The way that the story is told in this documentary, I thought I would just write the bulk of what I think most people would or should get out of this documentary, as far as just gaining knowledge for yourself on the situation. And the documentary, by the way, is called T.E.Lawrence and His Legacy. It's actually a 2-part documentary. So I think they're not exactly 30 minutes each, but they're I think one's 40 minutes, 45 minutes or something, and then the other one's a little shorter, maybe 30 minutes or something, so it's an hour in something altogether. if you watch them all in sequence. But yeah, it doesn't really matter. And again, that's another thing. It didn't really need to be in 2 parts either, because how choppy it was being told, it almost would have benefited just for if somebody cares enough to, or enjoys this kind of documentary storytelling, just to watch it outright, straight up. But yeah. Anyway, so enough rambling on about that. So I just got these point form facts, which a lot of you watching this that do have an interest in this probably already know. But again, if you don't, or if you're, as I said, if you're at that level, but you need some contextualization, here is what you can get out of this documentary. So. So his real name was Thomas Edward Lawrence, born on August 16th, 1888 in Wales. To this day, the U.S. military being deployed into Iraq and Afghanistan must study and learn about T.E.Lawrence. So that's an interesting, made a heavy impact on the subject matter, and I wonder if that's the same for the Canadian military, because here in Canada, we kind of have our own but whole different kind of system going on. So I wonder if that is the same. In a way, the politics which followed after his success almost undermine his purpose. And that's another thing I'll wait till the next documentary to get into, because to try and pull out the way that because I am reviewing this documentary at the end of the day. So besides trying to explain it the choppy way that they did it in this documentary, we'll just leave it as a simple fact like that without the details. We'll wait till later. He was born and raised in a middle-class home near Oxford, which he eventually attended Oxford University. He grew up shy and reserved, but grew up to be a leader, and was somebody who very much was not necessarily born to do so, but very purposefully set out to do so. T.E.Lawrence spent a lot of time between Syria and Palestine. Lawrence grew up with a deep interest in knights and chivalry and the Crusades. This fueled his spiritual journey through Arabia. Yeah, and that's definitely one thing I can relate to. A lot of people that have a deep interest in history can relate to that too. The medieval era, and especially, knights and chivalry and the Holy War and all that, is very, 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 whatever your political take is on it, it's very, very intricate and interesting history to learn about, so I can definitely relate to that. Just a couple more here. What occurred with T.E.Lawrence could be contributed to part of the Western tension with the Middle East to this day. So that's a very interesting fact, which would probably be best served getting into more in the next documentary that we review. Lawrence's followers were insurgents gaining traction due to the local people. So that's that, guys. Those are just some point form facts, and the documentary is much longer than it took to say those facts, but at least from my personal take, that's mostly what you would, what somebody would get out of this documentary, and what would be the most logical thing to sort of center your mind around while viewing this documentary, at least in my opinion anyway. So grading this documentary, I will give this one, as far as filmmaking goes, I think just a C. I recommend it, but I also don't highly recommend it, and I think another quick thing I'll say before leaving is I did really like the host. I forget his name. I've never really seen him in many other things, but he was actually there on spot in these places, boots on the ground doing it, and he shared a similar story. I forget the two areas of land that he backpacked between, but back in like the late 80s, early 90s or something like that, maybe even earlier, a bit later, I forget, but something like that, he did a big, all by foot backpacking trip in a different area than this, but in a very similar kind of environment and area in the Middle East. And he encountered, it was an adventure of its own. He encountered all kinds of interesting things and some bizarre things and some very noteworthy and, you know, sometimes very frightening situations. So he definitely had a foot in the door for being, you know, somebody to speak on the matter. Definitely, 100%. And he did the job well. He was actually there. And he did it well, very well spoken, very heavily knowledged on the situation and on the territory he was dealing with. So that's one thing that sort of saves the documentary. If it was somebody more with not as much of a charisma on the subject matter as him, it probably would have faltered big time. So it was good he hosted it. So yeah, that's my review for T.E.Lawrence and his legacy, everybody. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Look forward to the final episode of an adventure series for T.E.Lawrence coming soon, which will be episode 5. And please come back for more.